The morning light filtered through the crystalline walls of the Galactic Academy of Studies as students from across the known universe made their way to their classes. The Academy floated in the neutral space of Prime, a massive station that had welcomed thousands of alien species over the centuries. But on this particular morning, something was different. A strange tension hung in the air, and whispers spread through the corridors like wildfire. Morgan walked through the main entrance with a confident stride, her boots clicking against the polished floor. She was 23 years old, had brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and carried nothing but a small bag over her shoulder. She was the first human to ever attend this prestigious academy, and she could feel every eye in the hallway turning toward her. The alien students pressed themselves against the walls as she passed. Some of them trembled. Others made small sounds of fear. A group of young beings with beautiful iridescent scales and 4 slender arms actually turned and ran in the opposite direction when they saw her coming. Pretended not to notice. She had been warned that this might happen. Humans had a certain reputation in the galaxy, and it was not the kind of reputation that made others feel comfortable. Ha was a young female who had been studying at the academy for 2 years. She watched the human from behind a support pillar, her twin hearts beating so fast that she felt dizzy. Her scales had shifted to a pale blue color, which among her people meant extreme anxiety. Her friend floated beside her. Was a species that resembled a large blob of translucent jelly with small dark spots that served as sensory organs. His body quivered with each word he spoke. "She does not look so dangerous," whispered. "Perhaps the reports about humans were exaggerated." "The reports are never exaggerated," Ha replied in a hushed voice. "I read her file last night. Earth is classified as a Category 12. Do you understand what that means?" "I know it sounds bad." "It is worse than bad. Their planet has active tectonic plates that cause massive earthquakes. Their star bombards them with radiation that their thin atmosphere barely blocks. The temperature swings between extremes that would kill most species, and nearly 70% of their surface is covered with water." "Water is not so terrible." "It is a corrosive compound of hydrogen and oxygen that dissolves almost everything over time, and humans swim in it for fun. They dive into their oceans, which are filled with creatures that have hundreds of teeth, and they do this for recreation." His gelatinous body wobbled in horror. Had stopped at a directory panel and was studying a map of the station. She had been assigned to Professor's advanced course, which was known throughout the academy for its hands-on approach to studying dangerous creatures from across the galaxy. She had specifically requested this class because she wanted to learn about alien wildlife, and she was excited to see what the course had to offer. She found Laboratory 7 on the map and made her way there, still ignoring the fearful stares that followed her every step. The laboratory was impressive. Containment fields shimmered along the walls, creating secure enclosures for various specimens. Holographic displays cycled through images of creatures that would have given most humans nightmares, but looked at them with genuine fascination. She loved animals, always had, and the thought of studying creatures from other worlds filled her with joy. Professor stood at the front of the room. He was a Silurian, a tall being with deep purple skin and large compound eyes that reflected the light in strange patterns. His mouth was surrounded by small mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. "You must be the human," he said, his translator device rendering his words in a flat mechanical tone. "I am Professor. Please take any available seat." Thanked him and looked around the room. Students were filing in through the doors, but none of them would sit anywhere near her. She chose a spot near the center and set down her tablet, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. Ha entered the laboratory a few minutes later. She wanted to sit as far from the human as possible, so she chose a seat in the very back corner. Squeezed into the space beside her, his body making a soft squelching sound as he settled. Today we will begin our examination of predatory species from high-danger worlds, Professor announced once everyone had arrived. I have prepared a special demonstration that I believe will be educational for all of you. He gestured toward a large chamber at the front of the room. The chamber was covered by an opaque screen that prevented anyone from seeing what was inside. We have recently acquired a live specimen of a stalker, the professor continued. This creature was captured from the hunting grounds of IV and represents one of the most dangerous predators in our sector. A wave of gasps and frightened murmurs swept through the class. Ha felt her scales turn completely white. Professor, called out a male named X from the middle of the room, is this safe? Stalkers have killed trained researchers. They are apex predators with no natural enemies. The containment field will be activated at all times, Professor assured them. There is no danger to anyone in this room. I simply want you to observe the creature and learn to recognize its behavioral patterns. He touched a control panel, and the opaque covering slid away from the chamber. The stalker was a nightmare made real. It stood almost 2 meters tall on 6 powerful legs that ended in curved claws. Its body was covered in armored plates that shifted and moved like living metal. A long serpentine neck supported a head filled with rows of serrated teeth, and 4 glowing eyes scanned the room with obvious intelligence. Along its back, a row of venomous spines stood erect, each one containing enough toxin to kill a dozen. The reaction in the classroom was immediate. Students screamed. Several of them knocked over their chairs in their desperation to get away from the chamber. One fainted and had to be caught by her classmates. His body destabilized so severely that he nearly collapsed into a puddle on the floor. Ha was frozen in terror, unable to move, unable to look away from the monster in the chamber. But then she noticed something that made her fear multiply 100-fold. Morgan had not moved. She had not screamed or fled or shown any sign of panic at all. Instead, she had leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide and bright, and a smile had spread across her face. "Beautiful," the human whispered. In that moment, Ha understood why the galaxy feared. It was not because they came from dangerous planets. It was because those dangerous planets had created beings who looked at monsters and saw something worth admiring. The human was more terrifying than the stalker, and she did not even seem to know it. It took Professor nearly 10 minutes to restore order in Laboratory 7. Several students had fled the room entirely and refused to return. Others remained pressed against the back wall, as far from the stalker's containment chamber as they could possibly get. The professor had assured them repeatedly that the force field was functioning at full capacity and that no one was in any danger, but his words did little to calm their racing hearts. Morgan had not moved from her seat in the center of the room. She sat there with her chin resting on her hand, watching the stalker pace inside its chamber. The creature was magnificent in a terrifying way. Its armored plates caught the light with each movement, and its 4 eyes seemed to track everything in the room simultaneously. The venomous spines along its back had lowered slightly since the initial reveal, and found that detail particularly interesting. "Miss Morgan," Professor said, his compound eyes focusing on her with what might have been curiosity, "you do not appear to be alarmed by our specimen." "Should I be?" asked without looking away from the stalker. "The containment field is solid. I can hear the hum of its generators. And even if something went wrong, the stalker's body language tells me it is more curious than aggressive right now. See how its spines are lying flatter. That indicates a neutral emotional state rather than an attack posture." Complete silence fell over the laboratory. The alien students who remained stared at the human with expressions that ranged from disbelief to absolute horror. Ha found her voice before anyone else. "You can read its body language." "Most predators follow similar patterns," explained, finally turning to face her classmates. "On Earth, we have thousands of apex predators. Lions that can weigh over 200 kilograms, Tigers that hunt in forests so thick you cannot see them until they are already upon you. Great white sharks with rows of teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone. Crocodiles that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years because they are already perfect killing machines. Komodo dragons with venomous bites that cause their prey to bleed to death. She spoke casually, as if she were discussing the weather rather than an army of deadly creatures. I grew up studying them, she continued. My mother was a wildlife researcher, and she took me into the field with her from the time I was young. You learn to read the signs if you want to stay safe around dangerous animals. A lion with its ears flat and its tail twitching is about to charge. A shark that swims in a zigzag pattern is investigating whether you might be food. A crocodile that has gone completely still in the water is preparing to launch itself at you with explosive force. And you survived among these creatures, X said weakly. Survival is about respect. You learn how predators think, you give them their space, you never make them feel threatened or cornered, and most of the time they will leave you alone. Predators do not attack without reason. They hunt when they are hungry, they defend themselves when they feel threatened, and they protect their territory when it is challenged. Understand those rules and you can coexist with almost anything. Professor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a Silurian expression of amazement that his translator could not convey. Miss Morgan, I have studied for 300 cycles. In all that time, I have never heard a prey species speak about predators with such casual familiarity. Laughed, and the sound made several students flinch backward. Humans are not exactly a prey species, Professor. We are persistent predators. Our ancestors evolved to chase their food until it collapsed from exhaustion. They would follow an animal for hours or even days, never letting it rest, never letting it recover, until finally the prey's body gave out and they could move in for the kill. Some human communities on Earth still practice this kind of hunting today. The room had become very quiet. You are predators, said, his gelatinous form having finally stabilized enough for him to speak. But you have no natural weapons. I have seen images of humans. You have no claws, no fangs, no venom, no armored hide. That is true, agreed. What we have is endurance that allows us to outlast almost any creature on our planet. We sweat to regulate our temperature, which means we can keep moving when other animals have to stop and pant. We have hands that can grip and manipulate tools with precision. We have brains that let us plan, strategize, and work together in groups. Give a human a sharp rock and enough motivation, and they can take down just about anything. This is why Earth is classified as a, Professor said slowly, as if the realization was only now fully forming in his mind. Not simply because of the hostile environment, but because that environment produces beings who consider apex predators to be manageable obstacles rather than existential threats. The stalker chose that exact moment to slam its body against the containment field. Its jaws snapped at the barrier, teeth flashing just centimeters from the transparent wall. The impact produced a deep, resonating sound that echoed through the laboratory. Students screamed again. Several dropped to the floor and covered their heads. One in the back row actually fainted, slumping against the wall and sliding down to the ground. Did not flinch, she did not even blink. Interesting, she said, studying the stalker's attack pattern. It is testing the barrier to see if there are any weaknesses. That shows intelligence and problem-solving ability. This is a smart animal. Ha stared at the human from her spot against the wall. Her scales had cycled through so many colors in the past hour that she felt physically exhausted. Fear, amazement, disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of reluctant admiration had all passed through her in waves. Miss Morgan, Professor said, and there was a new quality in his translated voice that sounded almost like respect. Would you be willing to assist me with a special demonstration later this week? I believe your unique perspective could be extremely valuable for the educational development of the other students. Smiled, and for a moment she looked like the friendliest person in the galaxy. I would be honored, Professor. What did you have in mind? I would like you to show the class how a human handles a live predator, not through a containment field, but directly." The gasps from the students were loud enough to echo off the walls. "You want me to go in there with it?" asked, and for the first time she showed something other than calm interest. Her eyes lit up with what could only be described as excitement. "I would love that. When can we start?" Ha felt her twin hearts skip several beats. The human was not just unafraid of the stalker, she was eager to get closer to it. In that moment, Ha began to understand that everything she thought she knew about courage, about fear, and about what it meant to survive in a hostile universe was about to be completely rewritten. The demonstration was scheduled for 3 days later, and Ha knew she would be there to watch, no matter how terrified she was. She had to see what it could do. The news spread through the Galactic Academy faster than light itself. Within hours of Professor's announcement, every student on the station knew that the human was going to enter the containment chamber with a live stalker. Some thought it was a joke. Others believed it was some kind of elaborate test to see how gullible alien students could be. But when the day of the demonstration arrived, Laboratory 7 was packed with more beings than it had ever held before. Students crowded into the observation gallery that lined the upper walls of the room. Professors from other departments had found excuses to attend. Even some of the station maintenance workers had squeezed into the back corners to watch. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when a human faced one of the galaxy's deadliest predators without any barrier between them. Stood at the front of the laboratory, dressed in a simple gray jumpsuit that left her arms bare. She had tied her hair back and wore no protective equipment of any kind. No armor, no shield generator, no weapon. Just herself. "This is insanity," Ha whispered to from their seats in the front row of the gallery. "She cannot truly mean to go in there with nothing." "Perhaps she has some kind of hidden technology," suggested, though his voice carried no conviction. "Some human device that we cannot detect." "Humans do not have such technology. I researched their species extensively after the last class. They are considered one of the most technologically primitive spacefaring civilizations in the known galaxy. What they have instead is something far more disturbing." "What is that?" "Stubbornness. They simply refuse to accept that anything in the universe can defeat them." Professor raised one of his manipulator arms and the crowd fell silent. "Today, Miss Morgan has volunteered to demonstrate traditional human techniques for handling dangerous fauna. I want to emphasize that what you are about to witness is the result of millions of years of evolutionary adaptation on a Category 12. Under no circumstances should any of you attempt to replicate these methods. For most species, doing so would result in immediate death." "Professor," said calmly, "can you lower the opacity of the containment field? I want to see the stalker clearly before we begin." The chamber walls shimmered and became fully transparent. The stalker paced inside, its 6 legs carrying it back and forth in a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. Its armored plates caught the light with every movement, and its 4 eyes locked onto the moment it could see her clearly. A low, rumbling growl emerged from its throat. "Its spines are raised," observed, speaking loudly enough for the audience to hear. "It is agitated by the presence of so many observers. The crowd is making it nervous. Give me a moment to establish a connection." She walked toward the chamber slowly, her movements smooth and deliberate. There was no hesitation in her steps, no trembling in her hands. She moved like someone approaching a sleeping friend rather than a monster capable of tearing her apart in seconds. The stalker's growl intensified. Its muscles tensed beneath its armor. The spines along its back rose even higher, glistening with venom. Stopped directly in front of the transparent barrier and stood perfectly still. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply existed there, her eyes locked with the creature's 4 glowing orbs. Seconds passed. They stretched into minutes. The audience held their breath, and some of them began to wonder if they were witnessing a standoff that would end in tragedy. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the stalker's growl began to fade. Its spines lowered by a fraction. Its packing slowed and then stopped altogether. It stood facing, no longer tense with aggression but watchful with what might have been curiosity. "She is communicating with it," Professor explained in a hushed voice to the nearest observers. "By refusing to show fear or retreat, she is telling the creature that she is not prey. Predators understand confidence. They respect those who do not run." "I am ready, Professor," said without breaking eye contact with the stalker. "Miss Morgan, I must ask once more if you are certain about this. Once I lower the containment field, there will be a delay of approximately 5 seconds before I can restore it. If the creature attacks, that is more than enough time for it to reach you." "I understand. Lower the field." Professor hesitated for just a moment. Then he touched the control panel, and the shimmering barrier dissolved into nothing. The stalker lunged. It moved with a speed that the eye could barely follow, its massive body launching forward with explosive power. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of serrated teeth that could crush bone like dry twigs. "Moved faster." She at the last possible moment, her body twisting away from the snapping jaws by centimeters. Her hand shot out and grabbed the scruff of loose skin behind the creature's head, the one spot where the armored plates did not fully overlap. Using the stalker's own momentum against it, she redirected its charge and brought the massive predator down onto its side with a heavy thud that shook the floor. The stalker thrashed and writhed, its venomous spines flaring in all directions. Its claws scraped against the floor, seeking purchase, seeking something to tear, but maintained her grip with one hand while her other hand pressed against a specific point on the creature's neck. The effect was immediate. The stalker's thrashing slowed, its spines lowered, its muscles, which had been coiled tight for attack, began to relax. "Pressure point," explained, her voice slightly breathless but completely steady. "Most predators have them. Hit the right spot with the right amount of force, and their nervous system temporarily locks up. It does not hurt them at all, but it makes handling them much safer." She knelt beside the creature, keeping pressure on the immobilizing point while using her free hand to stroke its armored flank with gentle movements. "Easy now," she murmured, her voice soft and soothing. "You are okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Nobody here wants to harm you. You are safe." The stalker's 4 eyes focused on her face. Its breathing, which had been rapid and harsh, began to slow. After a long moment, a new sound emerged from its chest. It was different from the growl, deeper and more rhythmic. It almost sounded like contentment. "Professor," said, "you can restore the field now. I think our friend here has had enough excitement for one day." The containment field shimmered back into existence, enclosing both and the stalker inside. She released her grip gradually, rose to her feet, and stepped backward. The creature made no move to attack her. It simply watched her go with something that looked remarkably like respect. Walked out of the chamber through a small exit portal that Professor opened for her. The laboratory exploded with noise. Students shouted questions from every direction. Professors demanded explanations. Some beings were crying, though whether from relief or overwhelmed emotion was impossible to tell. The sound was so loud that it took several minutes for any kind of order to be restored. Ha pushed through the crowd until she was close enough to speak to the human. Her scales were cycling through colors so rapidly that she could not control them. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice shaking. "How did you know you would survive?" Considered the question with the same thoughtful expression she had worn while studying the stalker through the containment field. "I did not know for certain," she admitted. "There is always risk when dealing with predators, but I have spent my whole life learning how animals think. The stalker is dangerous, but it is not evil. It is just a creature following its instincts, and instincts can be worked with if you understand them." "But the fear," Ha pressed, "how do you manage it?" Smiled, and it was a warm, genuine expression. I do not manage it, I use it. Fear keeps you sharp, it keeps you focused, it makes you pay attention to every detail. The trick is not letting it control you. On Earth, we have a saying, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in spite of fear. Ha stared at the human with new understanding. She had come to this demonstration expecting tragedy or trickery. Instead, she had witnessed something that would change her perspective forever. She had witnessed what it truly meant to be a. The weeks following the demonstration brought changes to the Galactic Academy that no one had anticipated. Morgan, who had once been avoided like a carrier of deadly disease, suddenly found herself at the center of a small but growing circle of curious students. They followed her between classes, sat near her in the cafeteria, and bombarded her with questions about Earth, about humans, and about the impossible things her species did on a daily basis. Ha became her most constant companion. The young had experienced something profound during the demonstration, a shift in her understanding that she could not ignore. Her initial terror of the human had transformed into fascinated admiration, and she spent hours listening to stories about life on a. They sat together one evening in the Academy's garden dome, a vast enclosed space filled with plants from dozens of worlds. Soft lighting filtered through the transparent ceiling, and the air carried the mixed fragrances of 100 different flowers. Tell me more about the predators you kept as companions, Ha said. Her scales had settled into a comfortable blue-green pattern that indicated contentment. The ones you call dogs. Smiled at the memory. Dogs are descended from wolves, which were one of the most efficient pack hunters on our planet. They worked together in groups to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They were fast, intelligent, and absolutely deadly when they wanted to be. And your ancestors decided to live with these creatures. More than that, our ancestors invited them into their homes, shared their food with them, and eventually bred them to be companions and helpers. It took thousands of years, but we turned one of our planet's most dangerous predators into our most loyal friends. Dogs have protected human children, herded our livestock, helped us hunt, guided our blind, and comforted our sick. Some humans love their dogs more than they love other humans. Ha's scales shifted to a thoughtful purple. This is impossible for most species to understand. There are no large predators remaining. Our ancestors exterminated them thousands of years ago because they were too frightening to share the planet with. A lot of Earth cultures tried to do the same thing, said. Wolves were nearly wiped out in many regions. Lions were hunted until only small populations remained. Bears, tigers, and dozens of other species were pushed to the brink of extinction because people were afraid of them or wanted their land for farms and cities. But you stopped. Eventually, yes. We began to understand that predators are not just threats. They are essential parts of the ecosystem. Without wolves to hunt deer, the deer populations exploded and ate all the vegetation. Without lions to control the herds, grasslands were destroyed. Without sharks to maintain the balance in the oceans, fish populations collapsed. We learned that every species has a role to play, and when you remove one piece, the entire system begins to fall apart. So you protect them now, the creatures that hunted your ancestors. We try to. It is not always easy, and we do not always succeed. But we have learned that coexistence is possible if you put in the effort to understand each other. A notification chimed softly on his tablet. She glanced at the screen and her face lit up with excitement. Professor just sent me a message. The Academy has received permission for me to assist with their fauna rehabilitation program. There is a juvenile stalker that was rescued from a crashed transport ship. It was orphaned when its mother died in the crash, and it has been traumatized and aggressive ever since. The professor thinks I might be able to help it adjust. You want to rehabilitate a baby stalker, Ha said, her scales flickering with surprise. I want to try. Every creature deserves a chance, even the dangerous ones, especially the dangerous ones. The juvenile is not aggressive because it is evil. It is aggressive because it is scared and alone and does not know how to cope with what happened to it. With patience and proper care, it might be possible to help it heal. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Most worthwhile things are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien plants sway in the artificial breeze that circulated through the dome. Ha found herself thinking about everything she had learned from the human in the past weeks. It was not just the physical courage that impressed her, though that was remarkable enough. It was the philosophy behind it, the belief that understanding could overcome fear, that compassion could bridge the gap between predator and prey. "I want to help," Ha heard herself say. The words came out before she had fully decided to speak them. "With the juvenile stalker, I want to learn how to do what you do." Turned to look at her with genuine surprise. "Are you sure? It will not be easy, and there will be moments when you are very afraid." "I am sure." Ha felt her scales shift to a determined gold, a color that her people associated with resolve and commitment. "You taught me that courage is action despite fear. I think it is time I learned what else your world has to teach." Smile was warm and welcoming. "Then we will learn together. I will warn you now that I am not a perfect teacher. I will make mistakes, but I promise to always be honest with you about the risks, and I will never push you into something you are not ready for." "That is more than fair." "Good, we start tomorrow morning. The first lesson is the most important one of all." "What is that?" "Learning to see the creature as an individual rather than a category. When you look at the juvenile stalker, you need to see a frightened young animal, not a monster. That shift in perspective is the foundation of everything else." Ha nodded slowly. "I will try." Trying is all anyone can do. The rest comes with time and practice. They talked late into the evening, discussing plans for the rehabilitation work and sharing stories about their respective childhoods. Told Ha about growing up in the mountains of a region called Colorado, where bears sometimes wandered through backyards and mountain lions watched from the trees. Ha told about the crystal caves of her, where her people had hidden from the sky hunters before those creatures were driven to extinction. By the time they parted ways for the night, something had changed between them. They were no longer just classmates or curious acquaintances. They were friends bound together by a shared purpose, and that purpose was about to lead them into experiences that neither of them could have imagined. The juvenile stalker was waiting for them in the rehabilitation center, scared and alone and desperate for someone to understand. It did not know that help was coming, that a human and were about to show it that not all beings in the universe wanted to hurt it. But it would learn. With patience, with compassion, and with the strange courage that comes from choosing connection over fear, it would learn. And so would everyone who watched them work. 6 months had passed since Morgan first walked through the doors of the Galactic Academy, and the institution she had entered was not the same one that existed now. Changes had rippled outward from her presence like waves spreading across a still pond, touching every department and every student in ways both large and small. The department had expanded dramatically. Courses that had once been considered too dangerous for most students now had waiting lists. Professor had rewritten his entire curriculum to incorporate human techniques of behavioral analysis and respectful handling. Other professors had followed his example, and the Academy's approach to studying dangerous fauna had been transformed. The Rehabilitation Center had become a model for similar programs across the entire sector. Delegations from other worlds had visited to observe the methods being used, and many had left with plans to establish their own facilities based on what they had seen. At the heart of all these changes was the juvenile stalker that Ha had spent months working with. They had named him Scout, and he had grown from a traumatized, aggressive youngster into a healthy and surprisingly gentle adolescent. Scout followed around the rehabilitation compound with obvious affection. His armored plates gleamed with health, and his venomous spines lay flat against his back whenever she was near. He had learned to trust, to accept care without fear, and to distinguish between beings who meant him harm and those who only wanted to help. Students who had once fled at the sight of stalkers now visited the compound regularly. Under's guidance and Ha's increasingly confident assistance, they learned to read the subtle body language that revealed a stalker's emotional state. They learned to approach without triggering defensive responses. They learned that even the most fearsome creatures in the galaxy could respond to patience and kindness. Ha stood beside one afternoon, watching Scout play with an enrichment toy that the maintenance staff had built for him. The young had changed as much as the stalker over the past months. Her scales no longer shifted to fear colors when she worked with dangerous animals. Her movements around the compound were confident and sure. She had become a skilled handler in her own right, and students often came to her for advice when was busy. "You have changed everything," Ha said, "not just at this academy, but across the entire sector. Other institutions are reaching out to request human exchange students. They want to learn what you have taught us." Watched Scout bat at a ball that rolled across the enclosure. It is not really about humans, it is about perspective. Fear makes people want to destroy what they do not understand, but understanding takes work. It takes patience. It takes the willingness to get close to something scary and say, "I want to know you." You make it sound simple. The concept is simple, the execution is terrifying, laughed quietly. My heart still races every time I work with Scout. The fear never completely goes away, but fear is just information. It tells you that something matters, that you need to pay attention, that you should not be careless. What you do with that information is what defines you. Scout bounded over and nudged hand with his massive head, seeking attention. She scratched the soft spot behind his armored plates, and he made a deep, rumbling sound of contentment. Professor approached them from across the compound. His movement was slow and careful around Scout, but he no longer trembled or kept excessive distance. He too had learned from his human student. "I have news from the Galactic Council," he announced. "They are considering reclassifying Earth in their planetary database." "Reclassifying how?" asked. "There is a proposal to create a new category. Cooperative. It would acknowledge that humans have developed unique methods of coexisting with dangerous species, and that these methods might benefit the wider galactic community." That sounds like progress. It is more than progress. It is a fundamental shift in how the galaxy views your species. For millions of years, the standard approach to dangerous life forms has been avoidance or extermination. Your people are the first to consistently demonstrate that there might be another way. Looked at Scout, at Ha, at the compound filled with creatures that other species had written off as monsters. She thought about her mother, who had taught her to see animals as individuals rather than threats. She thought about the countless humans throughout history who had learned to live alongside predators instead of simply trying to destroy them. "On Earth, we have an old story," she said. "A child asks an elder which wolf wins the fight between fear and courage. The elder answers that the wolf who wins is the one you feed. For a long time, humans fed our fear. We hunted species to extinction. We destroyed habitats. We acted like the universe owed us safety and comfort. But we are learning to feed our courage instead, to face what frightens us and try to understand it rather than simply eliminate it. And that is why your species will change the galaxy," Professor said. "Not because you are physically stronger or more dangerous, though you are certainly both, but because you choose to meet fear with curiosity rather than violence." Ha's scales shifted to a warm amber, the color that meant deep contentment and belonging. "When I first saw you walk through the academy doors, I thought you were a monster wearing a friendly face. I was certain that you would bring destruction to everything you touched. Now I know the truth." "What truth is that?" asked. "You are exactly what you appeared to be from the beginning, a friend who was never afraid to get close." Scout purred against leg, and somewhere in the distance, the next generation of students gathered for their first hands-on lesson. They were nervous. Some of them were visibly frightened. But they were there, ready to learn what it meant to treat even the most fearsome creatures with respect, curiosity, and courage. The rehabilitation center would continue its work. More traumatized animals would arrive, and more students would learn to help them heal. The methods had brought from Earth would spread to other worlds, other academies, other species who had never imagined that coexistence with predators was possible. Change would come slowly, as it always did. There would be setbacks and failures and moments when it seemed like the old fear would win. But the seed had been planted, and it had taken root in fertile ground. The galaxy was learning a new way of thinking about fear and courage, about predators and prey, about what it truly meant to be dangerous. And that lesson had started with a single human who walked into a room full of terrified aliens and looked at a monster with admiration instead of dread. The future would remember this moment. It would remember the academy and the stalker and the unlikely friendship between a human and a... It would remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. And it would remember that sometimes the bravest thing in the universe is simply choosing to understand rather than destroy. The work would continue, the legacy would grow, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.